Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Entry, coming to you on this Thursday, June 19th. RIFC sees their first ever victory at Centreville Bank Stadium in the most dramatic fashion possible against North Carolina FC. Can they bank on this success and carry the momentum through a homestand that will see some of the biggest matches of the season played here at home? Can they even climb higher and go against Sacramento Republic, a team that's maybe not where they want to be in the standings themselves? And will we see back-to-back wins for the first time at Centreville Bank Stadium? Jason, all bets are off. We are on Cloud 9. We've been on Cloud 9 since last week's episode. What say you about everything going on?
I am doing great. Happy Juneteenth here. In regards to, it is an important day in our history. And then kind of tying that into to soccer here. The United Black Players of the USL have partnered with the United Soccer Leaders to have an auction here to raise some money. So they are auctioning off different memorabilia. Apparently that's a hard word for me to say. And the one gripe I have with it is there is a Hartford jersey available for sale. There is no RIFC. So I don't know how this partnership worked out, but I'm disappointed to see that our rival, donated something to be, auctioned off, but we didn't. So is what it is.
You're going to become a Hartford fan now?
Absolutely not.
Are you sure? I mean, that's what it kind of sounded like.
The funny thing though is they donated just a jersey. Other teams like the Oakland Roots donated a signed jersey. So they did the bare minimum.
Wait, no, you're missing the point. Intrinsically, they provided more value by providing an unsigned, unspoiled kit with no customization. Mm-hmm. If a player had signed that, given the current roster, that would have actually lowered the currency value of that kit. So they did everything appropriate, at least as appropriate as can be. So let's get into this show. Club World Cup is on, Gold Cup is on. Who's got time for all of the soccer? Because they should all be watching Rhode Island FC games on the weekends. Like, who's got time for this?
Yeah, there was a lot of soccer going on. I actually went over to Centreville Bank Stadium earlier today. We had a little bit of a watch party there. Got to see Messi knock down Porto a notch there. That was kind of fun. It has been interesting following some of the Club World Cup. It kind of feels like the US based teams, the South American, the Central American teams are kind of taking this a little more serious. And while the European teams,
Auckland City is taking it as serious as they can. How dare you?
The European teams are showing up with their legit rosters and playing the stars. Maybe they're not, putting on the best show. I watched the other night, the Monterrey versus Inter Milan game ended in a draw, but honestly, Monterrey looked the much dangerous team going forward. But then you also have funny things where you'll have, I think it was the champions of South Korea versus the champions of South Africa. And there's 12 people in the stadium. And it's cool that that's playing. They probably never played together. If it was close enough to me and the tickets were $20, I'd go to that. But I saw some of these ticket prices and a little too much, I think.
I had a dream the other day. I call it the Back to the Future moment where Doc Brown slips, falls, hits his head on the toilet, and then creates time travel. I had a moment like that the other day, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this. Instead of doing a Club World Cup, doing Champions League and all that, what if they just did at the end of every season 2 additional games? And I know it's great, more games. We heard Kano say in the interviews from last week, playing too many games is dangerous for players' bodies. And I do think that game totality is encroaching on levels that should not be continued. But what if we just did, after Champions League, what if you just did the winner of each of those particular knockouts for each of the federations? So CONCACAF, CONMEBOL, CAF. What if you just, it's 6 federations, right? What if you just did 5 more games and just determine this is the ultimate champion?
What you're talking about is the old format of the World Cup.
Go back to that.
No one actually cared about that tournament and was always in December or something at a weird time, and it never got any recognition.
But
I'm not saying
you're
this
talking
new
you're
format
talking
is
nationality though. I'm talking like the Champions Cup, right? Like, so if Tigres is the winner of CONCACAF, right? Have them go play the winner of CONMEBOL, like whether
no, that's really what it was. Like no
you're
one
not
paid
talking the World
attention to
Cup
it.
one. Okay, my
Yeah,
bad.
no, it literally was that. It's just like I never even watched it. It was whoever's the Champions League from each region would then all just meet up, and it was this weird thing where it was like,
But I mean, no one's watching the Club World Cup either. So I mean, go figure.
I don't know. All the matches are free on DAZN. I always thought it was called DAZN, but apparently it is called DAZN.
I thought it was DAZN. So there you go. There you go.
Last thing, really quickly, I saw the funniest thing ever, and I don't know if we would ever do this, but on Urawa Red Diamonds hater, like the fan of their rival team in Japan, flew all the way to America, got in a River Plate jersey, learned the Spanish songs to chant against them because he hates them that much.
So he wasn't a River fan. He
became a River fan.
What is the rival? Gamba Osaka? It's Gamba Osaka. So he was just an anti Red Diamonds. Zach Haribo would not be a fan of this guy. I think Zach Haribo is a major Red Diamonds fan.
That is a like funny and kind of like, friendly level of hating that is amazing. And I thought about like, imagine a weird timeline where somehow Hartford made it to a final. Would all of Defiance show up, immediately become fans of the opposite team for a day just to like amplify the hate and just boo them?
As long
constantly?
as it's not Lazio, sure, why not? That's completely possible.
Like that would be hilarious.
Completely possible. I'm waiting for when the money gets too good and the leagues all start pandering together and Wrexham starts entering into all of these tournaments as like honorary club or like guest club in attendance.
I mean, people were saying that about Inter Miami.
I mean, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. But hey, hashtag not an MLS podcast. Hashtag not a World Cup.
World
I can't ever say this. It's like the worst thing in the world, Jason. It's the worst thing in the world. I stumbled on it on the Blazing Musket podcast. I cannot string those three words together. Don't know why, but it is my Achilles heel.
You want it to be called the World Club Cup?
I don't want it to be called anything because it doesn't deserve being called anything. Let's get into the news here. Let's first talk about, whether you agree with it or not. Team of the Week honors get bestowed once again to Rhode Island FC. Walk listeners through the most recent addition from the RIFC ranks.
Yeah, so RIFC midfielder Maxi Rodriguez has been named to the USL Championship Team of the Week for Week 15 here. The 29-year-old midfielder earned the honor after scoring a dramatic game-winning penalty in the 5th minute of second half stoppage time versus North Carolina FC on Saturday, giving RIFC its first ever win at Centreville Bank Stadium. Not only is Maxi Rodriguez the only player to score in every single RIFC competition, or every single competition that RIFC is in this year, but he's also the only player to have scored multiple goals at Centreville Bank Stadium so far this year. The honor is the first of Rodriguez's Rhode Island FC career. He is the 7th RIFC honoree named to the USL Championship Team of the Week in 2025.
And you know what Connor would tell you about this?
He doesn't care about
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We should ask the players. I mean, it'd have to probably be an off the record comment that then we share later when they're not RIFC players anymore. Like, do you actually care about this? I don't, as I understand it, there's no incentive attached. There's no, like, if you get 3, player of the weeks, you get an extra $1,000 signing bonus.
Get an extra stipend.
Yeah, exactly. We'll wash your kit for you 3 extra times. I don't quite know if there's any advantage to it other than the accolades. But like for all intent and purpose, I've not really ever heard a lot of people like it's nice. I think players appreciate more the Defiance man of the match than they do necessarily getting those honorees that they get. Are you surprised that Maxi got it? Did he do enough? Did he put enough work in the game to get it?
Yeah, I think he has been very consistent with us, and we talked about a little bit in the past here that maybe he just kind of needs to add a few more goals and assists to his name to kind of get this quote unquote recognition that he's like very much deserving, because he'll quietly play a very good game. He'll go out there, he'll tackle, he'll defend, he'll pass, and do everything that a midfielder needs to do. But if you aren't getting those goals and assists, you're not going to get your name up there in lights.
Agreed. So let's get into the next one here. Big piece of news, a little bit of a shock, but we've seen players be released from clubs now. I think most prominently Justin Dillon out of Colo Spigs. So, no surprise here as Rhode Island FC goes the other direction. A testament of this club's, fortitude and strategy, as they announced on Wednesday that they had signed defender Grant Stoneman to a contract extension, of course, pending league and federation approval. The 30-year-old USL Championship veteran has played a vital role in this year's RIFC defense, as well as last year's, but he's already kept and helped contribute to 4 shutouts this season across 12 regular season games. He's almost at 1,000 minutes for the year already. We're close to the halfway point, so not quite a surprise there. When Stoneman was asked about the contract extension, he went on to say, "I'm very excited and happy to stay in Rhode Island." I'm sure he wishes he was still in the beautiful San Diego weather. But he then went on to say, "Putting just my heart and soul into this project is something I want to see through, and it's been amazing so far. The locker room is amazing." I'm sure he was talking about the players and the actual locker room there. And I just love showing up to training every day. I'm honored that Connor Smith has put faith in me, and I'm excited to keep pushing to be a top contender in the East. Connor went on to say, "Grant has been an important part of our club and a proven leader since day one. Leading by example with his work ethic, he brings consistency and poise to the locker room, and he provides stability to our back line. We are excited to keep him in the Ocean State." Jason, we talked about this at length a little earlier last week, and it's going to be a talking point a little later down the stretch in this show. It's not a surprise to see Stoneman remain with this group. It's more of a curiosity when you continue to add players on contract extensions. I think doing quick math, I'm sure Ime Mabika, he must at least be on a multi-year. I doubt he would have picked up a contract, even though he was out of, there was no club.
Do you think, though, he was actually in a position where he would just take anything?
It could have been. We think more akin to like Rio Hope Gund on that regard, right? So I don't know for sure, but like I look at, Frank Nadarce contract extension that was already announced earlier this year. I'm assuming Ime Mabika, hopefully he's on at least a 1.5, contract. Karifa, yeah, we knew was on a multi-year. I assume there's a club option to extend that. So my guess is he's probably on a 2+1. So from the 3 center backs you already have now with Grant on this extension, is this a good thing when, would you say that we are one of the better defensive teams that's important to lock down this entire center back line? Or would you want flexibility going into the off season at the end of the year? Like, is Karifa then the option? Is he the odd man out as of right now, knowing that probably 3 of the 4 are already kind of locked up?
It's hard to say, though, because Karifa put in a good shift this past Saturday. I guess it'd be better to have options in the sense of, you'd rather have a wealth of talent than kind of an issue. We've seen that there has been health issues with this team. So kind of our strategy of oops, all center backs. I'm okay with it, especially because we have been very strong defensively this year. So, give them credit where it's due. And if anything, these could be more assets for the club to, as they, head into the off season, maybe some of these players, as we kind of have a rotation of guys who can kind of move in and become those first team players. Maybe some other guys either shine too bright to the sense that we maybe have to move them on, but it could benefit the club in terms of like getting a transfer fee.
Sure. And I think about what producer Torrin said with this wealth of depth that we have currently that we're experiencing when everyone's healthy. Remember, Hugo Bacharach hasn't played yet, and he's more likely on a multi-year deal himself as well, coming from that side of Minnesota United. So, I look at it as we may have our defensive strategy set for the next couple of years. Stoneman is not a player who, survives every game full health. He gets his knocks, he gets banged up a little bit. So, I think defensively, I think this is a solid piece of play. I know there's a lot of people in the chat, and as soon as it was announced, I got like 3 or 4 DMs. Like, do you know the length? Sometimes these things. I don't know the length of it. Assume that at USL, assume that Kano wants to keep things somewhat fluid. They're probably expressing the contract option. He's 30 at this point. Well, he'll be 30 going into that, I believe. So, is he? Yeah, he's the 3rd oldest player, right? I think he's the 3rd oldest player. Yeah, because Koke and Maxi they're like a month apart, and Stoneman's like right behind them in the age.
29.
Yeah, so Stoneman, at that point you're north of the wrong side of 30, even though it's just barely. You want to hold on to players like that for their leadership, their mentorship, but then also like, is he going to be the guy? I assume he will, and Kano has faith in him. So the contract has been inked. the pen is down, and Grant Stoneman will continue to be playing in the amber and blue. And we'll get to argue about this in another year, whether this was the right decision or not. I'm all for it. I believe in Grant Stoneman, and I believe that he's going to do incredible things for the squad. And
Yeah.
I think it's only a year for those that, again, want to say, like, well, what is it? It's probably a 1+1 contract extension. So anyways, let's get into the game overall. It was a game. It was a victory. Like, we got to stay positive on the Monday mailbag after we did the player interviews and the coach interviews. So if you want to go see those and you didn't yet, go back to the Monday mailbag for that. We talked at length that a victory absolves all players of their sins, of all their mistakes. But we said we'd look back and we'd kind of cover this and see what did this game actually shape out to be, what kind of game it was. And while it wasn't a perfect win, Rhode Island FC has demonstrated one thing to me very painfully obvious. They don't like to do things the easy way, Jason. Having defeated North Carolina at the death, and I mean at the death. I think there were 15 seconds left on the clock when the penalty occurred. Of course, that takes a little bit of time, so the goal doesn't get buried till the 90+5, but there was only 3 minutes of stoppage time, and I think it had about 15 seconds left in the game. That was probably their last action of the night, unless it had been a corner kick or whatnot. But the first thing that comes to my mind is the resilience that this team showed. And then obviously, of course, the second part being that we can get results finally at home and against tough competition. We've been talked about around the league from other pundits that says, like, oh yeah, Rhode Island FC can win against the teams that everyone's winning against. Like, show me their results against the top 4 standing club. North Carolina, we come in, we close the door, we close the gap, more importantly in the standings, and we show the league what we can finally do, what this team has been capable of doing the entire season. Kano himself said it at the press conference. We've never been a bad team. We've always been a good team, a great team even. Just the results weren't going our way. The score line didn't end in our favor. What were your initial thoughts on the game?
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair from Kano in the sense that when we, last week you did a really deep dive into a lot of the stats and not a lot wrong there, but it just wasn't going our way. And sometimes in this regards to say, like, was this a perfect game or a complete game or any of those sorts of things? No, but we got the win, and that's what's important. And you could see how elated the players were to finally kind of get that monkey off their back, as they say, in the sense that, it's in the back of their head, like, we haven't won at home yet. We haven't won at home yet. And that pressure keeps building and building. And to finally just say, to have that out of their mind and just be able to show up at home and just play their game and, like, be themselves.
I after the game, we were trying to identify who had the best celebration of the night. Rio Hope Gunn on camera, just cloud nine himself. Like, you could see it.
He was so elated.
Clay screaming in the hallway. We later confirmed those screams were Clay Holstead just having the time of his life. Obviously, Maxi, there's a really good quote, which we'll talk about here in just a bit. But, this meant something to them, right? Kano said that in the grand scheme of things, yes, it's important to be able to finally celebrate the first win. But this was more than that, right? This was that catalyst, this, like, how do we just focus on playing the best version of our game and stop worrying about delivering on expectations to fans, because we hadn't done it yet, right? I expect there to be, the players will always say pressure is a privilege and all of that stuff, and that's true when you're at that level. But at the end of the day, the breakdown for it is they don't have to worry about that again. Like, they need to focus on themselves and the results, and they don't need to worry about the expectations of anyone except for the own ones that they've been set by them as players, and of course by the technical staff moving forward. I will keep 2 interesting stats, just continue to float them in front of fans. We still are unbeaten against North Carolina FC. It's the list is getting smaller and smaller, right? Especially after crashing out against Loudoun and then finally Louisville. But North Carolina FC still has never been able to beat us across all competitions. We're now 2 wins and then the 1 draw. And so that's interesting. And then also the big one, and I love talking about this, 19-game streak of winning, or at least, again, being unbeaten when we score first. It's such a commanding stat, because it tells you how this team can play primarily, and then it shows you what they can be exposed to in the back half of games. Ironically enough, while it wasn't it was the same story again from what happened with North Carolina, another come from behind victory, not in the sense of where we were down from the beginning, but with the equalization, we're able to scrape out a win. it's starting to show that there's a little bit more of a complete performance in this squad, something we've been concerned about over the last 5 matches. Like, we see this team in the first 30 minutes, gets hairy in the final 15, and then there's a drop off, right? Like, usually there's that second half of hold on to your butts because nobody knows what we're going to get. This team fought through the entire thing. An interesting pendulum swing, right? Like, I think we saw first 15, 20 Rhode Island FC's direction, the next 20, 25 North Carolina's direction. Coach Kano, kind of for the first time that I can remember the season, makes the initial changes, makes the initial tactical adjustments, and then he's off to the races and really kind of commands the second half of the game. North Carolina kind of left on the outside looking in, and then of course rewarded with that penalty. I want to say, while the game wasn't pretty, when you look at the individual player performances, and North Carolina absolutely tried to battle back, I still think this may be one of the best games we've played all season. Do you agree with that?
So far this season, I would say so, because there hasn't been, like, you look at the Westchester win and say, well, that's the
remove
opponent.
Jägermeister.
Like, yeah,
go championship only.
Championship only.
You could argue Birmingham, you could argue Oakland, and you could argue Tampa, but like, those 3 teams never really made Rhode Island FC work for it. And Tampa being the oddball because the shots all were like the lowest XG possible. This could be the game that shows, like, yeah, they're not always going to be pretty wins, but like, they're hard fought victories.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think compared to any of the other wins that we've had, this was the one that RIFC had to fight the most for. And that's kind of how you build that character and become like the better version of yourself as a team.
So then let's talk about how Kano constructed his game day roster to find that success on the pitch.
Jackson Lee here in net still for the injured Koke. Playing a back 4 here of Rio Hope Gunn, Karifa Yao, Aime Mabika, and Aldair Sanchez. A double pivot here of Zach Harivo and Amos Shapiro-Thompson. That being said, sometimes Amos Shapiro-Thompson was kind of on an island there. Zach Harivo would actually push up a lot. In that 3 attacking midfielders there in front of him, Joe Brito, Maxi Rodriguez, and Noah Fuson. With Mr. Chico up top, we saw on the bench here Frank Nodarse, Clay Holstead, Isaac Anking, Danny Rivera, Taimu Okioshi, Grant Stoneman, and Will Meyer.
If you had told me Clay Holstead and Frank Nodarse were going to be bench players in this match, I would have said no way. Obviously, there's rotation. You've got to manage the minutes. But like, you always, of those players too, like, I've never seen them not be able to go the distance. So it was interesting to see, especially because Harivo, I think, played all 3 performances at a full 90. I think Amos almost pretty close too. And you're right, by the way, when you look at the average positioning of Rhode Island FC's formation, it really wasn't the double pivot that we see on the screen. Amos was left kind of as the lone 6 quarterbacking the back line. Zach Harivo much further up the pitch, closer to the linkage to the top 4. Overall, what were your thoughts when you saw this lineup get released? Or like, did you go, oh yeah, this is the one? Or were there question marks when you saw some of our most consistent players not getting the starting nod?
I mean, in regards to, like, I didn't immediately question it, especially because, like, before the match we still hadn't got that home win, right? So I was okay with coach, having some changes there. It was a long week, right? We had the midweek game against Louisville where Quizera saw a red card. So obviously that's why he was not included in the lineup here. It was, I think, a bit odd to see Clay drop in the sense that you kind of expect him to be in the squad as much as humanly possible. But then we have to also accept that, like, he needs rest too.
You're telling me he's a human being? I'm pretty sure he's a robot.
It's possible. Maybe he's a replicant, but I don't know. I mean, he's the one player you would like look at and say, oh yeah, he played every single minute of the entire season, and like not even question that as a fact. But the reality is he needs some rest. Speaking of changes, I mean, coach in the post-game interview said there, like, Amos was kind of on an island in the first half there. It's why he brought Clay in the second half there. And maybe ultimately that led to the spark there, because towards the end of that first half, we were getting kind of run through a little bit there. So in hindsight, it was an interesting kind of change, something to try. Didn't work out. Coach makes the right adjustments and we get the result on the night. So
And I think the other big nod here, Danny Rivera getting his first minutes, not only starting from the bench, but then also getting the substitution. We talked about the intelligence of the fandom as he got subbed on, realizing the importance of that moment. Sometimes fan bases can be like, yeah, whatever, that Danny Rivera guy.
Who's that?
But the crowd absolutely showed up knowing and understanding how critical of a moment it was for him to get his first minutes. I mean, it was almost just seconds on the pitch, really, but super important to see him finally back. It'll be curious how he gets deployed in the future. Talking about the game overall and kind of the performances that we saw, kind of just jumping straight into the goals and the importance of them. I want to start with Chico's goal, obviously, in the 18th minute, gets the header from Sanchez and buries it. He had a couple of looks on the night, but this was definitely the most dangerous. And I think it's full credit, right, to both Sanchez and Chico on how this goal was created.
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, we really have to give Sanchez's flowers here. That is like laser accuracy, pinpoint cross. Something that maybe he learned from a certain team we might be talking about a little later, who's pretty good at crossing, if you didn't know. Like I said, Chico still had to put the work in there. He was able to get on the inside there, and this goal doesn't happen, though, without the kind of combination of those two. The assist was the third of Aldayer's RIFC career so far, and he's tied for team leading second in the USL Championship regular season.
Interesting, like you said, with Dequa, and it's so important to not give the guy his due credit here. When you go back and watch the way that run was set up, he's initially running towards let's call it a near post run as Fusan's trying to marshal the ball up. Fusan gets displaced with the ball on his attack run, and then it falls back to Sanchez, and Dequa does something, and I don't know if he's done this season a lot and we've just missed it, or maybe he's been doing it the entire time and it just didn't work out. But Dequa resets, so he kind of backtracks to give himself running space back through. The defender takes a step up into space, and Chico first goes like towards the far post and then gets around and tucks back in front of the North Carolina defender to be perfectly positioned. And then even still, once he's on target with where that cross is landing, he still then redirects it to the far post instead of like the way his body's direction was carrying him towards the near post. So like it was honestly, like, Sanchez gets credit for serving it up on a silver platter, but that goal is not easy to put away. Plenty of attacking players will miss that 9 out of 10 times. So Chico absolutely deserves the credit for it there. And, I also want to make sure that we talk about this because like afterwards we talked to Chico about how important this was. And he said that, with JJ being injured, he's had to be a more complete striker in his absence, where his, normal play is getting in behind lines, getting the ball, doing the quick tap-ins, getting the redirects. He's not necessarily ever been a hold-up striker. He's never been a target forward, if you will. But in that absence, he's gone on to do that. And we've talked about his physical dual stats over the last few games. But like we also need to go back and really reflect on how important his contributions overall have been to the squad this season. It's his second goal of the season. The first one obviously in that Oakland Roots destruction game. But in addition to that, he's also now tied for second place in highest goal tally, which we'll talk about here in just a second because there's some interesting stats there. But he's also then now leading the club across all goal contributions in all competitions, right? So he's at 4 in the total for Rhode Island FC in the regular season. He's doing the work. Like we can talk about, and producer Torrin said, JJ Williams is this phenom that everyone's waiting for to come in and save the club. Like we have to give credit to Chico, and I think that even if he goes on and is inconsistent for the next 2 or 3 games, he is an important part of the squad. Can we expect more from him? Can we be disappointed when he doesn't produce? Absolutely. But he has a spot on this team. He'll obviously benefit when there's a second striker pairing next to him at some point. But like, I hope that this can put to bed the, we need to remove him from the squad, or he's not good enough for what he gets paid. You saw how much this goal meant to him after the game. You saw how much he celebrated in the moment. We'll always want more from the guy, and I think he has to come to terms with that. But at the same time, we have to look back and reflect on like he's done enough so far. Sure, 4 goal contributions across 13 matches now. Is that really what we want out of a striker? I'll let other people argue that. Let's see what happens now as this team returns to basically full strength in just a few weeks. Let's see what we can really do. We've moved past the preseason. We've moved past the first third of the season. Like This is where we want to get hot. And all the players will tell you they would rather peak in the back half of the season than peak too early. Talking to you, Detroit City FC, where are you at?
But no, you're right there. I think that he's definitely becoming more of a complete player. He's adding a lot more elements to his game. And then as he does that, these are some things that maybe he is not as comfortable and familiar with in his game. So I think that in the way that the team has been struggling a little bit, we have to like be fair to him because he's still going out there and putting his body on the line and giving everything he can.
Is he, in your opinion, doing enough?
I mean, obviously, I would like him to like score more goals for us, but at the same time, no one else is, and we saw it in previous year. Like we were able to spread the wealth in terms of goals, and we ended the year with like 16, 17 different goal contributors.
Correct.
So, and we did go in lots of runs of forms, right? Where he would be streaky and score in bunches and then kind of fade away for a while. And I think maybe because the team overall was doing better, we weren't as hard on him. Right now, we're frustrated because we saw the highs of this team and are still moving that kind of goalpost and saying, well, you can do even more, and not kind of giving them their process to kind of get to where they need to be.
Speaking of goals galore across the team, while they're not yet at the wide range that they were in the 2024 season, Rhode Island FC now has 8 players that have contributed to goals this season. 4 players, technically 5, are tied for first place with 2 goals apiece. Chico, Clay Holstead, JJ Williams, who has now missed 5 games, I think. Maxi Rodriguez after the penalty here in this most recent game. And then, of course, our favorite signing of the year, player own goal.
I thought his name was Owen Goal. I think he's Australian.
Correct. I totally forgot about that. And then Joe Brito, Noah Fuson, and Zach Haribo all round out the bottom half of the pack with 1 goal apiece. This team doesn't seem to be like the type of team where one individual player is going to put all of the success on themselves. Interestingly enough, the player that was the most helpful last season, and he was one of the heroes of the day, Frank Nodarse, completely absent from this list. And again, we saw him get 6 goals in the regular season last year off of corners, set pieces, kind of one of the more weak points in the squad this year, if you think about it. I know we joked at length on the Monday mailbag about the Chick-fil-A corner kick and what constitutes still earning that chicken sandwich. But, when you think about it, not many, if at all, have we scored a lot of goals from set pieces or corner kicks this season. And it was kind of one of our fun specialties last season, both in the indirect kick of infamy now, as well as some of the other set piece tactics that were used. Haven't really seen success yet in that space, despite having some of the biggest bodies in the league with Aime Bobika and Krifa Yao and Frank, of course, himself. So interesting that we're still continuing to see that spread. Obviously, if you add to all competitions, some of these players' numbers get a little bit more inflated, especially JJ Williams, but not quite there with like the prolific Cal Jennings striker system. We don't have that one individual player. Sacramento does, and we'll talk about that, but still not really part of our game. Getting back into the overall kind of like spread of this, I want to talk really quickly about the NCFC goal, kind of reminding fans why this game was not super pretty at all times. North Carolina puts on the afterburners in that second 20 minutes of the first half. Full credit to Metzigan to take the team on his back and just dribble through and make some Rhode Island FC defenders look silly. First, almost like quasi-megging Sanchez in the box, and then Mabika just falls over and Rafa's got a clean shot at goal, buries his one opportunity. Like you said at the beginning, with AST as like the lone 6 and North Carolina operating a double 10, they had a lot of chance creation. They had a lot of attack in the sense that when they were catching Rhode Island in transition, their passes, their sequencing was clean, and they could get up the field really, really fast. Like they had a pace that Rhode Island FC wasn't prepared for, and with the accuracy of their passing, it was 2 to 3 passes, and they were back in Rhode Island's final third, making a dangerous run on Jackson Lee. I don't think that they were quick to adjust to that after the goal. I don't know if this was like we scored, we did it. Like some people the game's over. We scored the first goal. You stopped this is golden goal, right? And Rhode Island FC kind of got caught unawares, not really ready to face what North Carolina was bringing their way in that second 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw in the second half after he made the adjustments, the kind of flow of the game started to become more beneficial to RIFC. But yeah, in the second part of that first half, every time NCFC went forward, they looked dangerous. And, it took us a while to adjust to that. You bring up the slipping and the falling. It had rained earlier that day, and we saw them dousing the field with water before. I mean, did they just turn the pitch into a slip and slide?
I mean, Chico was slipping and sliding, so.
I mean, ultimately it worked out, but maybe the groundsman needs to
maybe the groundsman thought that the turf needed to water to grow. Maybe that's where we're at, because it's that hybrid turf, right? It's that synthetic turf. Maybe there's some real grass in there that needed a little bit of extra growing time. And then, of course, moving into the final goal of the night, Maxi Rodriguez, like we said earlier, burying the penalty with seconds left in the match. A well-earned penalty from Frank Nodarse. He gets summoned to the spot and makes RIFC history. Thoughts on that overall? What were your feelings? I mean, we were up in the press box, and it was just like, this is surreal, right? Like, of course, it's going to come down to a penalty.
Yeah. I was joking in the Louisville match where I felt like we probably could have gotten a penalty from there, but we wouldn't have scored it. And that's kind of been the history with this club, in the sense that, if JJ is out there, I feel pretty comfortable about how a penalty might go. But historically, this club hasn't been too great at penalties. And I hadn't seen Maxi take one for us. So it was like, is he going to embody that, that curse, or is he going to just walk up there and bury it, And so obviously afterwards we talked to him, and he's very comfortable about taking penalties, and it's good to have that reassurance that okay, we have another player on the team who feels very comfortable to step up to the plate, if you will, and kind of just knock one out of the park there. But it was a very nervy match, or nervy moment, if you will, because it gave us that opportunity to finally win, or it could have just been another missed opportunity for this team to finally get the win at home.
I think the ironic part was Maxi said in the post game that he blacked out, and it's like, wait, what? It reminds me of I know you guys were talking on the mailbag about who was it from Chelsea, former Man City, Cole.
Okay, yeah, Cole Palmer.
Yeah, and
ice
so
cold.
Yeah, ice cold. But for me, it was almost more of as he said it, I was thinking of Old School, where Will Ferrell blacks out in a debate and has this masterclass of an argument, and then just comes to and can't remember anything he just said. So that was fun to see. But then when Maxi said, "Oh, I'm pretty good at taking penalties," and he knocked on wood, I went back and looked at the stats. He's 35th all time across all seasons in the history of USL Championship. So he is a very good penalty taker. He means business. Interestingly, his numbers between 35th and first are he needs to score 30 more, I think, or something like that, to make it into the top 3 or 4. But very, very good, very consistent taker. And honestly, too, when you think about it, we've seen Maxi be one of the first players pulled in some of these matches, right? We've seen him also be one of the last players pulled. He's not always played complete 90s. We could have been in a situation, Jason, where just as easily as he converted it, we could have been in a situation where he was already off the pitch, and then who takes it, right? And we could wax around on who is the penalty taker when JJ and Maxi aren't on the pitch. But it wasn't necessarily all it all had to really work in our favor, that he was the right man. He was the one that steps up and takes the shot. Ironically, he has converted. It's not ironic. I don't know why I said that, but he's converted his last 5 penalties since his last one where he failed. And guess who he failed to score against?
I don't know. Hartford.
It's Hartford. Yeah, that's the only time I ever bring up stats. Hartford. So and then
I mean, Ribeiro, was it against Ribeiro?
It was in 2023. So I don't know if Ribeiro was with the team.
Because I mean, he was a phenomenal keeper.
Yeah, I know he was there last year, but I don't know.
One redeeming thing they had going for him, and they messed that up.
So on top of the penalty being his second goal of the championship season, after scoring against Birmingham Legion, when you look at it, and you had kind of said it in his Team of the Week honors, he's the only player so far in Rhode Island FC history to score across all competitions when you include the new Jägermeister Cup and US Open Cup. So that's a really exciting part to see. And then like when you think about it too, like he's just this kind of player that he really demonstrates qualities on and off the pitch. And so if you haven't had a chance to listen to the interview, go in and just kind of understand what kind of a player he is, and it'll tell you everything you need to know about why he was the guy to come and play for Rhode Island FC this season. So I want to ask this one last piece before we move on. You had mentioned something about how you were looking at, we've been asked on Monday, was this backline our best backline pairing of the season so far? I kind of had some concerns about the speed of having Mabika and Yao together on the pitch. Didn't really see it in this match, but is that something for the future that we need to be worried about?
Yeah, I had some concerns there too. And then when we look at, signing Grant to an extension, and maybe he's not the fastest, but being a experienced player, maybe he's a little bit better about knowing where to position himself against certain opponents. When Mabika gets up to like stride, he can seem pretty fast there too, being as tall as he is. I think with how many different center backs, we have a lot of flexibility there. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of rotation throughout the back line, maybe based upon our opponents, if they feel comfortable and they want to kind of have a battle of strength. We've got two of the biggest dudes here in the league who are going to like beat you up all game. But maybe if you're just playing a bunch of small, fast guys, who are going to go down every time they run into these walls and win fouls, even if maybe they're not deserved, maybe you might swap that out. Like maybe you look at something like Stoneman and Bacharach one day or something, if we ever see him play.
Likely. So let's get into the next segment, which we talked about, a couple weeks ago, and Kano again saying like we haven't had a bad game, we've just had bad results. Like sometimes they don't go your way. Both teams want to win. We've been trying to corner what is the differentiation between this season and last. We've been looking at stats. We talked about conversion last week and how while our strikers are being put into good positions, their conversion rates are, they've dipped considering looking back at last season. But I think I've actually really figured out the Achilles heel of this team on at least the stat column perspective. I think I figured out why again, better results than we were at this point last season. But I think I can figure out where all of our troubles have been originating from. Do you want to take a guess?
Is it from a certain right back that we lost?
It is absolutely Steven Turnbull.
He's living rent free in our head for two.
It is absolutely Steven Turnbull. And I have stats to back this up. But the reason why we say it's Steven Turnbull is we saw something that we hadn't seen in at least a goal buildup in quite a while. And that was all of the hard work that Frank Darce put in coming off the bench and being able to dribble through North Carolina FC's opposing defense. After the game, we heard that, Frank is a Brazilian street baller kind of player, like making all of his, moves and learning them all from the hard streets of Cuba. And like, he just picked up that flair and was like, hey, this is what I'm going to play as. He even went on to say, like, that's not something you can teach today. He called like the game robotic nowadays. And like players are single pass distribution, not finding those beautiful moments. And he gave a full nod to what Frank has produced. And sure enough, in that game, he had the most successful dribbles. He really, like, as soon as he could get past the final line, like, you saw the shape just completely disintegrate for North Carolina, and they went into emergency defense, right? Like, they suddenly were out of their zones. They were out of shape. And Frank completely just broke this team down all on his own, especially in that second half. So I started thinking, okay, we got really excited by seeing Frank do this. It's not a dimension we saw in his game last year. Why did we not see that? Because if he had this in his wheelhouse and we need it, we did need it on that game, where was this last season?
I mean, a lot of it, he was in the back line. We didn't see him as a wing back a lot. So
right. So then I was like, okay, well, what were the dribble comparisons in regard to last season? And so for those that are following along on the YouTube video, which I highly encourage people to watch that unless they're driving and they can't take the time. But what you'll see now, actually, and I have the wrong slide up, is you'll see dribbles completed in comparison for 2024 to 2025. And obviously some of these players weren't here last year. So if they were in the championship, I pulled their previous team's numbers And if they're new to the championship, obviously there's no comparison. But look at the performance, and this is all relative to their mid-year performance. So I kind of gave 2 additional games in terms of data consumption to the 2025 campaign because it's easier to split it in half, and we're almost at the halfway point. But when you look at these production numbers, look how far off Jojea Quezera is in his dribbles compared to last. And this is just completed numbers. This isn't success rate yet. So Jojea Quezera off by he's at 12 right now, and he had almost 60 at total for the season last year. So at the halfway point, he should already be at almost 30 at this point in the season. Noah Fuson down probably about 40%. JJ Williams down 60, 70%, obviously with his injury. The only player on this pitch who's outperforming either their total dribble completions last year or their projected completions is Frank Nadarce now. And so when you look at that, even Maxi Rodriguez, who with his other team, he's way off track. This team, and I don't know if it's the possession style that Kano has built into them, where they're more comfortable cycling possession and looking for that one key moment to dribble past the defender and then upset their shape. Our team isn't taking on nearly as many opportunities or chances as they did in the prior season when it comes to dribble completions. The only difference here, Jason, and this is the weirdest part, is while they're taking less in total, they're being way more successful in it. So here's the second graph. And this is where you see, while much fewer in their chances, they're being way more clinical with it. They're being crispier, as I like to say, with their dribble success rate. And you see again 2024 here in blue, they're either really close to it considering the amount of games, or they've already exceeded those expectations. In 2024, their average conversion rate was 52% success dribble rate. Right now they're in the 60s, mid 60s for 2025. So they're better with the dribbling they do, but they're taking less opportunities. Is this the X factor that's been missing from the team? And is this what's maybe been holding them back from scoring a few extra goals and getting an extra few looks at net?
It's hard to say because
you were supposed to say yes. So I gave you an open door there.
Possession-based football and dribbling are almost incompatible. Like Coach said, too much of the world soccer has gone to this possession control style where you don't want to give the ball away. And very few players are able to consistently be successful at dribbles. When we looked back at Jojea's stats for last year, he would lose the ball more than any other player on the team. But that's because he was taking chances. He was taking players on and he would dribble and, he would lose it half of the time. But those times that he would get past them, he'd then be able to get into a good position and create, a high scoring opportunity. And we would put some of those away. The problem is we've taken away some of the losing the ball and gone for a let's try and suffocate, let's try and possess, let's try and look for those opportunities. We've increased some of our dribbling stats here by being better when we do it, but we just don't do it as often. I
have a stat. Do you want to see the stat before you go farther?
Sure. What do we got here?
So the final one here is the dribbles completed and their success rate when compared to the 2024 departures. So these are all the players who were on our squad last year who are no longer on our squad when comparing it to the 2025 arrivals. So these are players that did not play for Rhode Island FC last year. And when you look at the dribble comparisons, again, now I did not do the math on this. This is a full season 2024 introspect versus basically halfway through the season of 2025. There were almost 80 dribbles completed by the players no longer with us that have departed this team last season, whereas we have less than 20 so far completed by the very same arrivals that replaced those now gone players. So, and again, when you look at Steven Turnbull, had 56 dribbles last year. So he's the major component.
Yeah,
of this,
he's
right?
the one. I wouldn't sit here and say oh man, we, as much as I like Doyle as a human being, it just kind of didn't work out.
Sure.
We don't necessarily need him back to kind of fix all of our offensive woes.
But where I'm going with this is that I think, and maybe Steven Turnbull, maybe it's not fair to say it's a Steven Turnbull problem, but I think what it is right now, it's a right wing back problem. And we've been asking our questions all season about Aldair, who's only had one successful dribble so far this season, by the way, had a little bit more in Sacramento last year, but not a ton more. Like I think maybe 3 or 4. So he's not a dribbler, and we've seen that from his game, right? He gets as far up as he can, and then he'll either throw a cross in or he'll recycle the ball. He's not Jojea Quazera, but we haven't had Jojea Quazera on the right, even though Jojea Quazera has been playing on the right. Because look at Rio Hope Gunn, he's not that type of player profile. So that is one of the dynamisms that we've been missing. Is like when we get the ball up the flank on those actions, we're not really beating that last defender on the wing and then making defenses collapse in. The defender's keeping pace or shutting off the attack, and then we recycle and we wait till there's a breakout pass or there's a cut line that we can take advantage of. We've lost this ability in comparison to the players that are no longer on the squad versus the ones that are here. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that's not their game. That's not their composition. But dribbling has definitely taken a huge hit in comparison from 2024 to 2025.
Absolutely. And maybe if we have a break during some of the summer months where I think we don't have to lose Quazera too much, right? Because I think some of the qualifiers will pick back up again in the fall. Maybe he can get some opportunities to try and take some players on. With Danny Rivera coming back, I don't know if that was his style. I forgot his profile. We barely even seen him play. I think in regards to if you can find a way to integrate dribbling, some of that street football, if you will, with the robotic possession style, kind of find a blend. I mean, that would be, it would take you to that next level. And maybe that's kind of the next evolution of football right now. Maybe we could see something like that. But I think if we're going to continue to be a possession team, I wouldn't be surprised if, we just don't look at dribbling the ball that much. We do it a little bit when we can. Frank Quazera, they'll do what they can, but ultimately it's just not going to be who this team is.
Yeah, and I think we'll have to see if Rivera has that in his tool belt. I didn't pull Rivera's stats when I ran this first because he only has 2 minutes, so he's got 0. But it'll be interesting. And then Kevin asks, what is a successful dribble? A successful dribble in relation to a completed dribble or an attempted dribble is when you do get around and evade the defender and maintain possession. A completed dribble is where you do the attempt and then usually you've beaten the defender, but it doesn't lead to forward momentum. It leads to I've kept the ball away from you and we're going to do a pass on, or the ball doesn't.
You have to
dribble, to move forward.
You carry the ball and you move it forward and you retain possession.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I'd like to see more of it, and it leaves me with questions about Frank because, we talked at length, is he the right person to play in a wingback space? And right now, being the most successful dribbler,
with how many center backs, maybe he can kind of be that X factor, that street footballer who's maybe not going to execute the possession style to a T 100%. But sometimes you need players like that. I remember with Kevin De Bruyne leaving City, he was one of those players who kind of fits the mold to the possession style, but at the same time will just see a pass that no one else sees. He'll take a shot that he would be the X factor at times for City, in the sense that he would do the unexpected and just create something out of nothing. And maybe what this team needs is a little bit more of that maybe they are being a little bit too robotic. Maybe they are just passing around too much around the box, and someone just needs to try something to try and create an opportunity to pull this team forward.
It'll be interesting to see. Want to talk about the last two things. One, first half, or actually we'll start with the captain's corner. There's no controversy here. I want to be really clear with everyone as we start this up. But it was interesting to see Ayman Babika get the armband, considering he's the most recent signing. He's the most recent addition, and there are other captains that are in the captain's core from the squad. I haven't gone in this year and asked who's a part of that captaincy. Usually it's both the recommendations of the technical staff, and then there's a little bit of a vote amongst the players on who is that group of people. I think from last season it was Koke, it was Grant, Kevin Vane got one for the Open Cup, but I think that was more of an honorary thing. I think Haribo got the captain's armband. I know Chico was in there as well, and I want to say maybe Actually, that's all I can say for sure. But it was interesting to see Ime get it, especially with Chico being a captain of that original group. There's nothing to it. I just would be really, now that I've seen a player that I didn't expect have it, I'm now more interested in seeing like who is the group of captains this year. Is there a legacy carryover? Obviously, normally if Koke's healthy, he's getting the armband. But interesting to see that. Is that a massive sign of faith from Kano that you're getting the armband, especially with like Stoneman not playing on the night?
I think it's definitely a good sign to show that he puts faith in him potentially. And maybe this is just something I didn't notice in his game. I don't know if maybe he was very strong about like ushering the back line, kind of keeping everyone in order. Maybe he's very vocal about like kind of making sure that the team keeps their shape. And I mean, he does have some experience with MLS, so he's he's not like a 20-year-old kid. He's a bit of a veteran, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he has a bit of that kind of brought some leadership presence to that back line.
I have seen him in practice as players make mistakes or as they're going through drills. He's there motivating, like doing this faster, do this better. Come on, you got this in you. So like I've already seen him step up in at least in the practice grounds. Curious to see how that. I mean, obviously it was a win. He gets to claim as the captain the first win at Centreville Bank Stadium. So credit to him. But he wasn't on my bingo board for the captain's corner. So curious, who are our captains this year? It'll be. We'll see if we can get that from the club and see like who are the official group of players, just so we know it for the future. It's like a fun, silly thing that like people don't really think about, but then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, yeah, didn't know that. Blah 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 is now a captain of this. Will Myers is now a captain of this squad. And then finally, really want to talk. We already kind of talked about the emergence of Rivera. I really want to talk about this first half action versus the second half impact. Some important things here. Rhode Island FC's now conceded 6 goals in the last 15 minutes of the first half. Only the Oakland Roots have conceded more in the championship this season. And they've also conceded 11 first half goals in 13 games. Only Birmingham, in addition to the Oakland Roots, have conceded more. So we've talked at length that this is a first half team, but as good as they are, they're also just as bad in terms of defense.
The duality of man.
What is it going to take for this team to continue to demonstrate what they showed in this match of being resilient, being able to lock down games, prevent scoring, but then also claw back points when they've been left on the table after first half reactions?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where if we're looking at the last 15 minutes of the first half, are they clock watching too much, or are they thinking about just getting to the half instead of trying to maintain control of the game? Are they feeling games out too much and it just happens to be that it's a bit of a coincidence? I imagine it's definitely a stat that coach would kind of have a look at and think, what do I need to do here to kind of solidify this team as we move into the second half of the season here?
Well, I know coaches was happy with the result, but do you think if we were to ask him, like if we were to go hit him up in a post game right now and we said, hey, do you believe this team is playing a complete 90 minutes? Do you think he would say that they are, or is that where the room to grow is for this squad right now?
I think that probably is where the room is to grow for the squad. Like while they have been pretty strong defensively, a lot of it also has come down to like just silly mistakes that you would hope over the course of a season would be ironed out.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we ask that this week, and then, we'll see what he asks me back. Let's move into the preview for Rhode Island FC versus Sacramento, hoping that this squad can carry on that momentum. First, talking about Sacramento Republic, they currently sit in 10th place in the Western Conference with 14 points from a record of 3-5-4 after 12 matches and a most recent midweek loss against the Birmingham Legion. Considering how far down the table they are, it's surprising to see them with a positive 3-goal differential and one of the best defenses in the league. That was a bit of an interesting thing as we kind of did the deep dive homework for the week on the game. Their recent form includes a bit of a mixed bag with 2 wins, including a 5-0 destruction at home of the Las Vegas Lights. They've got 5 draws and 4 losses like we talked about. And then despite having a game in hand, Sacramento's averaging just 1.16 points per game. They're currently just hovering outside the playoff berth in that 10th spot. But they're on the fringes, Jason, and I don't know if they're going to make it back in. There's been some trouble in this team. One of their fans who talks to us pretty regularly was asking themselves, is the Collins era already over in this group? And then you look at Sacramento across all competitions, they've put up 9 goals against the Las Vegas Lights, right? With that 5-0 and then a 4, it was like a 4-1 or a 4-0 before that. I'm pretty sure that, whatever you can say about Neil Collins, he definitely is probably the reason Antonio Notarino doesn't have his job anymore after those 2 beatdowns. That being said, though, they've only allowed 12 goals across their regular championship season play, making them the 3rd best defensive unit in the league right now. And when they do give up goals, they've only given up more than 2 on 3 different instances. So we talk about the quality of that defense. They've been pretty resilient now. The only problem is they've just failed to score. They've only got the 1 win in their last 5 matches, and they've failed to score in their last 3 games now overall. Climbing up this table is going to be a difficult task ahead. They're on an away stretch right now, and it's going to be hard to see this team, who normally we call them one of the perennials, right? They're we always expect to see them in the top 4, top 5 of the West. They've had a bit of a fall from grace this season.
Yeah, I was surprised to see them doing so poorly this year. Like you said, one of the perennials, the team that was kind of been flirting with MLS forever. And you just kind of expect them like, oh, they're somewhere in mid-table maybe, and they'll kind of pick up a run form. But
they're the foil of Lou. Like we've always thought they're the foil of Lou. Yeah.
Yeah, but, maybe because we took Aldair from them. No. They actually, like I mentioned earlier, I watched a lot of tape on them. They are very good at crossing. They are a crossing machine. But their problem is, unless they are playing the Las Vegas Lights, they really don't score a lot. They are very organized in the back. Danny Vitielli is a very good goalkeeper. Whatever his defenders in front of him, don't shuffle out, he's there to save. And so they don't let in a lot of goals. The problem is they just don't score anything right now. And they are one of the best teams in the league for accurate crosses. And they in going back and watching a lot of tape on them, I definitely could see is okay, this is where Aldair learned to cross so well. This team is a crossing machine.
He went to the school of Mark Briggs.
Yeah. Jack Gurr is a beast. But the problem is there's no one there to really finish those chances. They maybe get one. Like I said, unless they're playing the Las Vegas Lights, they just aren't scoring. When we kind of reflect upon our meetings with them last year, there's only one. There's the 2-2 draw on May 11th there. Some contrasting styles there. 20 total shots versus Sacramento's 9. So a lot more efficiency on their end, or maybe, that was still kind of early for us. We hadn't figured it out. Maybe kind of not as strong in the back as we wanted to, could have been there.
Do you remember that game? So the stats are going to say one thing, but that was a very big moment for the team. That match against Sacramento was a very, we call the Memphis game the turning point, but that game actually showed us the first
Jack P.
Right? Not just Jack P. So Jack P got his first minutes with the team, but also JJ Williams. When we saw both of those players come onto the pitch, it was like we had never seen this team play like that.
It was a glimpse of what we were going to see later on the season. Not the complete product, as you could see, we, draw kings, but it was definitely a glimpse of the potential that this team had. And I think I do remember, despite it being a draw, feeling very excited after that match and saying wow, this team, can actually be very exciting going forward, even if maybe it's not the result that we wanted. Very aggressive, high volume shot creation, where kind of Sacramento at the time actually prioritized possession and game control, where it's actually changed a little bit this year. They're a bit more middle of the pack, just at kind of averaging an even 50% there. Rhode Island's physical approach there was evident: 21 tackles versus 16 and 24 fouls versus Sacramento's 11, resulting in kind of a gritty, press-heavy game.
Broke Russell Cicerone. We crippled him off the pitch.
Yeah, he's alive. He's still playing though. He's back for them. Kind of playing a little bit further forward for them right now than kind of remember him playing last year. And then comparing those challenges, when you look at the Sacramento team actually this year, they are incredibly efficient in terms of tackles. Their tackles to yellow card ratio, they are not getting a lot of yellows for how many tackles they commit. So I think they've probably integrated that into their game. They're being very smart instead of kind of being reactive, where you realize like, oh crap, we're out of position. I just need to take this guy down. Like, no, they already know they're in the right spot so that they can make the proper challenge, win the ball, and then kind of like, move it up the wings or whatever they want to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting into kind of the performance results and overall history of Sacramento this season, Neil Collins, obviously the big signing, kind of one of the marquee signings. Everyone was shocked that, the Mark Briggs era was over. Again, always the bridesmaid, never the
He
bride.
just got one over him.
And yes, he did. And so Neil Collins returns to the USL Championship after his time at Wraith Rovers. They activated the compensation clause, which saw him depart the Scottish Championship side. Collins was the reason he's so famous was because of the success that he saw down with the Tampa Bay Rowdies after winning the 2021 Championship Coach of the Year award. Rowdies didn't see the overall success that they wanted to see with him, but nevertheless, he was one of the most dangerous coaches there in the championship before moving on. He now comes back, and under this new management, Sacramento's built around their defensive strength and their home dominance so far this season. They've completed, a couple of clutch finishes. I'm not going to argue that it's been, again, that attack doesn't seem as consistent as it needs to be so far this season. But like they started with the best victory of the opening campaign, beating New Mexico United, who, for all intent and purpose, were the other favored child. They were the leaders in the Western Conference last year, currently the leaders again. They now had Dennis Sanchez, who did what he did with the Lights, and they have this come behind 2-1 victory. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, Sacramento is going to be the team again. They're going to be the problem. They're going to be the thorn. They're going to be the Lou in the West. And it doesn't happen. It seems to kind of, sputter and die. And the weird thing is it's not a bad team. Again, like I said, defensively, they've dominated, right? You look in the April and May area, and including the USL, the Jägermeister Cup, they've beaten teams all across the board. They beat AV Alta out in the deserts of Antelope Valley. They've beaten Indy 11 at home, or they didn't beat Indy 11. Sorry, they drew Indy 11, but they have demonstrated quality all across the board at home. And then, like I said, with the Lights, they murdered the Lights not once but twice. You don't do a Miami goals galore twice in a season and survive to tell the tale. And so it's been interesting to see this team with, like you said, Danny. Is it Vitello?
So there's a second I, and when I was watching a lot of tape on them, the announcers would say VTLO.
VTLO. Okay.
There's like another E sound there. I'm
I
probably
love
not pronouncing it right.
I would imagine it's VTLO. But VTLO's got 3 clean sheets now for the season. Defensively, like I said, they've been doing all the work. They just can't find the back of the net unless it's against really bad teams. And they do the JJ Williams. They condense all of their goals into just a few opponents at a few different times.
I do want to point out, I know as a Scotsman, you have to hate the English, and you only mentioned Wraith Rovers and forgot about his time with the mighty Barnsley. But
I didn't forget. I chose to omit. There's a difference.
Your Scottish bias you're showing. But anyways,
that's the Irish in you.
I'm not supposed to hate the English too. So anyways, back on track here. In kind of, mid-June, Sacramento closed out 5-game homestand here with a disciplined 0-0 draw against San Antonio FC. I remember when I went back and watched that, San Antonio had a lot of chances there, and they did really well to kind of, keep the door closed there. And that extended their undefeated streak and not allowing their guests more than a single shot on target. A lot of that because there are so many blocks there in a sense of, and they're very structured in the back, with the back 3, and they do a really good job of kind of shuffling them out, forcing them into positions where they don't want to be. So that's been their strength. Like we've mentioned how good they are in terms of defending. Coach Collins emphasized the team's collective defensive effort. Luis Felipe in VTLO spearheaded resilience in the back, but with a lack of consistent goal scoring, this team has lacked that kind of killer edge to close the matches out. Opposite of RIFC, though, who are on their own homestand, Sacramento is now in game 2 of a 4-game road stretch where the club has shown less confident performances, being the first team to lose under former gaffer Mark Briggs.
Take that, Collins.
Yeah, and that was such a that goal in the dying minutes. And so watching that goal seems like the maybe part of the key to actually score on this team. They were probably a little too overcommitted, and Birmingham just hit them on the counter, didn't give them time to actually reset fully. And that's where they got caught out. As the problem is, if you let Sacramento get back into shape and form, they put the wall up and you're not getting past them. If you can draw them out, if you can kind of get them maybe a little too far up the field and you can kind of hit them on that quick counter, you can hurt them.
And we'll talk about why or why not a possession playing out the back can either be the way to defeat this team, or it can be the ultimate punishment that Rhode Island FC can experience on this match. Going quickly through the injury report, it is getting less and less by the week. Now you go Batrack, which again, we saw him at last practice. We'll see it again tomorrow. He was in everything but contact training. So he was doing all of the exercises. He was doing all of the routines. He just wasn't in any of the contact drills. JJ Williams, we talked, he's 2 to 3 weeks out. Could be longer, but that's the estimated timeline. Mark Ibarra also doing drills. So he was in full training minus contact again as well. And then Koke was the only other player. So really JJ Williams and Koke are the farthest two out, both of them with those calf strains. So hard to see. On the Sacramento Republic side, they do have one player in Rodrigo Lopez who remains questionable. He had an ACL injury last season. Saw some minutes in either the Open Cup, because I saw his name on FOTMob. So he either got Jägermeister or Open Cup minutes.
He played recently, I forget, in one of the matches when I was watching them.
But he hasn't made the game day since. So he's, let's call it week to week. He could be needed just because of the amount of rotation going on with this team right now with 3 games in 7 days. But don't know. But he's the only player that
maybe
could be
like a late sub.
Could be. So then let's get into what we believe RFC is going to line up as for this game against Sacramento Republic, and know that no matter what we say, it's going to be completely wrong.
Oh yeah, always wrong. So we're looking here, Jackson Lee and net still, a back line there of Rio Hope Gund, Aime Mabika, Grant Stoneman, and Aldair Sanchez, with Clay and Amos Shapiro Thompson there as your holding midfielders. Jojea Quizera will return to the lineup. We think will be deployed as an attacking midfielder again, as maybe his times as a left wing back are over. Maxi Rodriguez and Noah Fuson finishing out those other attacking midfielders, with the one and only Chico up top. With so many players returning, coming back to health, it's really kind of hard to even figure out who's going to be on this bench too. And then even, we always joke these are going to be wrong anyway. Outside of Chico up top and Lee and net, I wouldn't be surprised if this is, a handful of these players are there, but could be different. But at the same time, one thing that coach does do pretty consistently is when someone, or not just someone, but the collective puts out a good performance, he will reward those players. Considering this is closer to what the second half lineup would have been, I think this is probably not too far from what we might see.
I mean, so you say that, but this is really a fool's errand, right? Because the reality here is, with all of those healthy players, and even more on the way with Bacharak, Ibarra returning, it's difficult to be able to understand that. And then also we talked at length, does the 3-5-2 return when JJ Williams is back and you have a 2-striker system, right? There is so much change that's going to be occurring to this roster in terms of lineup setting comparative to where we were 5 weeks ago, compared to where we were 8 weeks ago. I'd love to run a stat and understand at some point, which coach has had the most chop and change in the season and tinkering versus which one has these are the 11 best players I have. Maybe they're the only 11 players that I have, and this is all I can put out. So I'd be curious, what's the most stable? It's probably Bob Lilly is the most stable. it may be Coach Cano Smith as the most unpredictable and always creating change, whether due to injury or experimentation. But the thing, and Nate's already asking it here in the chat about like, where's Krifa Yao in this? Is he hurt again? He's not hurt. There's a problem. So you read out the starting 11. We're going to read the bench here. We've got Frank Nodarse on the bench. We've got Zach Harivo on the bench, Joe Brito, Taimu Okiyoshi, Danny Rivera, and Isaac Anking. The problem now that's developing with this squad, and the reverse of what we've experienced for the earlier months of the season, is we have too many players available for selection. So we, have to ask ourselves who plays and who stays. And like when we were constructing this, we had to have the argument: what is the quote unquote weakest center back that we have in terms of versatility and in terms of where you can play them? Because when you look at what like Kano said last week, my players are all so good they can play any position I need them. Again, subscribing to the school of Pep Guardiola. When you look at these players, there's a player that has to sit out in this game. Could it be Krifa Yao? That's what we have selected, but it could easily be Taimu Okiyoshi. It could easily be Isaac Anking. It could be Joe Brito. I don't think you're going to trade in offensive weapons for defensive weapons. So then Danny Rivera may have played his first minutes and his only minutes for the next couple of weeks. It could be Aldair Sanchez. Maybe Sacramento Republic knows what Sanchez can do and they're going to like remove him from the board, or more likely he'll score, a bicycle against them. But like that's the new problem that this squad will have for the foreseeable future. Who doesn't play here, Jason? Is it Krifa Yao, or should another player? I know you're like raising your hands. It's a difficult thing, but that's what we do here. We don't get paid to do this, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, but
what player doesn't show up?
So with all healthy center backs, Nodarse technically listed as a center back, right? But he had his best game out on the left wing this past weekend. So does he ever play center back again? Is he some pseudo, like, do we switch to, having him play as wing back? And then even Danny Rivera was playing as like a right winger, right midfielder. And sure, coach was like, well, I just put him out there to whip some crosses in, just get him a few minutes. But like, I wouldn't be surprised to see him play that, especially with how solid Rio Hope Gund has been back there. He's not really an offensive threat in a sense, but he locks down that right back position there. He doesn't let anyone kind of have a lot of joy over there. So in that regards, are we just converting like fullbacks to wingers now?
Yeah, but again, all of those players have an additional dimension to their game. I would argue Krifa Yao is the only pure defender that probably can't do anything but be a center back. So then if you need,
Mabika's like our backup striker, right? If we're just gonna like lob balls
sure, but for this example, all of these players like Isaac Anking can play a false 9, a 9, or a midfielder. Joe Brito, we've seen that happen literally. Zach, I think, can play a defender, defensive midfielder, or a midfielder. Taimu Okiyoshi, defender or a midfielder. When you look at like
Clay, goalkeeper, center back, right back, midfielder, right winger. I mean,
yeah, but so I mean, to Karifa's detriment, he may have the hardest job of if he's not the starting center back because we need him there because Grant Stoneman's not available. And we talked last week. Does Frank Nodarse become the most important substitute player because he can come in for a hurt or a yellow carded center back, or he can flip the game on its head by becoming a dangerous wing back? Like, that sucks to think that Nodarse wouldn't get these starts because considering how beneficial he is, but like he may become this very important player. I'm not saying that's the right answer. I'm just saying now coach has so many choices that this is the opposite of the problem he's had all season. And right now, I would say not because Krifa Yao doesn't deserve to be on the squad, but if you're looking at versatility and being able to play 1 to 3 different roles on the team, that's like the one thing Yao doesn't have. So unless he's starting and like Stoneman's out for nursing an injury or Mabika's out for nursing an injury, I don't see Yao upsetting or taking a place on that bench versus another player. I just don't see it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point in the sense that like Rio is very comfortable being, kind of like a legit like right back as opposed to like, no, just a center back. Grant Stoneman, I would argue maybe is kind of in a similar boat, but also he's got that experience. He's very comfortable on the ball. He's a very good like long passer to kind of just bypass the midfield and kind of move the play forward. I joke about Mabika being a striker, but also like he has come into this squad and been very comfortable on the ball and like, been a very strong presence. It's it's hard to say because I really like what Karifa brings to this team. Like he can look like a little rocket, literal like brick wall at times. He played
I like that
very
you said little. I know it was a mistake, but like that's the last
yeah,
word I would ever use for Karifa Yao.
literally. I know, definitely not little. But he had a very good game against
Like
North
he
Carolina.
doesn't deserve to not be in the squad. But again, for what he offers, he may not be in the squad. And that doesn't account for Bacharak and Ibarra, who would also be, if not starters, argued contenders for the bench. It's a weird place to be in when we were like, we need more players. And now we have too many players, but we still need all of them at the same time. So, anyways, we got to move on. I'm going to probably butcher here what I thought. And I try to do some information. It's always hard in a midweek game, like to see what a coach will do for rest and rotation. So I went with Sacramento's strongest formation. I know we've got Will in the chat, so he's going to probably like correct me on how wrong I am for this. But no matter what, they're most likely going to play in a 3-4-3. And in that, you're going to see Danny Vitiello playing as their goalkeeper. He's been one of the best keepers in the league consistently for quite a few years now. And then in that back three, you're going to see Lee Desmond, you're going to see Jared Trimmer on the right side with Freddie Kleeman in the middle center back. He's the center back of center backs, and Lee Desmond out on that left center back side. In the midfield, it's not quite a midfield that we would know it as in like the Rhode Island FC structure. They definitely like wingbacks playing in their midfield four, and they rely heavily on their wingbacks. So you're going to see Jack Gurr, legend of a player, out on that right wing, with most likely Nick Ross in the middle, and then of course Michael Benitez, who is also a left wing back but can play left mid, kind of tucked in centrally. And then fans of Rhode Island FC should know this name, Ryan Spalding of New England Revolution fame, played last year, saw a lot of success with the Tampa Bay Rowdies, didn't get the contract offer there, instead going to the West Coast. He'll be out on that left wing back role. And then in the front three, kind of a combination. They can kind of all overlap on each other. So like saying the positionally they're going to be here, probably not so much the same, but you're going to have, of course, Russell Cicerone, you're going to have Christian Pirano, and then Sebastian Herrera. This is the strongest complement that Sacramento Republic could field. Will we see all these players? Will we see Lewis Jameson instead get a starting role up top? Hard to say. Will we see Blake Wiley or Willie in the midfield? I don't know, but this on screen is their best starting formation that they have in the moment. Some of these names are big names, Jason. We saw some of these players last year grieve Rhode Island FC. Obviously, we already talked about the Cicerone injury. Are there any players here that you're aware of that kind of make you think Rhode Island FC is going to need to pay attention to them? Who are the players you've got as your players to watch?
Yeah, so I've got a striker here, Sebastian Herrera, 28, is kind of a center forward here. So far, 6 goals, 2 assists in all competitions. So maybe key traits here to kind of look at here: aerial strength, link-up play, penalty box movement. He's emerged as Sacramento's most reliable scoring threat this season. Powerful and physically imposing striker. He excels in hold-up play and is kind of a constant presence there on set piece. His movement in the box there kind of allows the wingers to get some space there as he's kind of drawing the attention there, and his ability to kind of play with his back to goal helps Sacramento in their attacking phases. He scored the winner in the U.S. Jägermeister Cup Group opener, and then recently netted his 100th career goal. Pretty big deal there.
Good pedigree. Obviously, I went easy and I picked the goalkeeper only because, like I said, he was legendary last year. He's always in the contention for Golden Glove. There's always just a player that edges him out. So when you're always in like the top 3 standing, in a lot of ways, that's almost a more important consistency standard. 12 league matches so far, 81% save rate before Birmingham. I'm sure it's a little bit lower now because of that. But you can't really talk about Sacramento without his contributions. Not only is he like the most consistent performer and a vocal leader of the squad, he's known for the big moments. Like he's a shot stopper. You don't want to see him in penalties. He's someone who handles high pressure. Like we talked about Maxi dealing with blacking out in those high pressure moments. Like this keeper is the exact opposite. Like in the sense of if this same scenario was opened up, I'd be less confident Maxi Rodriguez could bury one past Danny Vitiello. He plays the crucial role in organizing that defensive shape. He's comfortable with a 3-back line. Not a lot of keepers in this league are, right? They want the more defenders possible in front of them. The healthier, the better they look. And like you said earlier, keeping San Antonio to 0-0 and keeping their home streak alive, he's been the main reason. Like I think of Hernan Ibero from Hartford Athletic. Like sometimes keepers are main character energy, sometimes they're not. We have Koke Vegas. I would say he's a main character energy, but then we also say, well, we have Jackson Lee. We have just as good, here in the wings. There's no replacing a keeper of this magnitude that Sacramento has right now, and he is one of the players that it's going to make Rhode Island FC's day the most difficult possible.
Yeah, and then another one here to wrap this kind of up, Christian Pirano, an attacking midfielder winger, 25, kind of likes to play on the right wing a lot there. 3 goals, 4 assists so far this year. Very creative, good at dribbling, chance creation. Definitely a dynamic player here. One of the most creative in regards to what Sacramento can put out there. Low center of gravity, superb technical skill. He often kind of drifts between the lines and spaces to kind of unlock those defenses with those incisive passes. He's also a threat for cutting inside on his left foot. Likes to do his very Ian Robin impression there. Scored a few key goals this season so far. And then in that 3-4-3 lineup, he typically operates on the right there, like I said, but likes to kind of float centrally. Like those front 3 do like to move around a lot there, but he likes to connect with Herrera and Jameson a lot there. Ability to draw fouls there, slip passes between Rhode Islands could kind of be an issue there. We haven't seen this team score a lot of goals, but they have a lot of creativity up there. Maybe it's kind of something that we kind of know very, very well here this season.
Yeah, and I also, in Pirano's stats, interestingly enough, he's one of the highest dribble completions and success rates, because I had the stats active. I was like, who in Sacramento? And Christian's like in the highest elements of the league so far this season. So dangerous with the ball at his feet, very comfortable taking defenders on one-on-one. And then I've got I think he's the best player right now for Sacramento Republic. I got Jack Gurr in that right wing back position. Jack Gurr has led the defensive stats, defender of the year contender year after year. He's literally the heartbeat of this Sacramento build up on the defensive side as well as the offensive side, kind of locking down their right flank. He's an engine. He's just the machine that doesn't stop. He's got 2 goals and 3 assists this season, 25 key passes though. So we talk about those chance creations and those buildups to goals. And that's Jack Gurr's jam. And we also talked, you had mentioned accurate crosses FC. Jack Gurr and whoever's playing the left wing back side, whether it's Spalding or Benitez, they are just capable of getting up the flank as fast as possible. They have the strength, they have the grit to take on those actions and then just whip in crosses. And they've been very dangerous in the mixer so far this season, and they've been consistent in it. And, that's just the offensive side. Defensively, they don't lose many duels. I don't have the stat. I accidentally deleted the window as we were talking about it, but he does not lose a lot of duels on that right flank. So he can get up, he can be dangerous, and he can be equally consistent on that back line. The only argument I would make, and I think this is kind of panning out to the larger picture here for this game, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, a lot of this could be down to wing play. Right. And so if you keep in mind, we go more defensively with Rio Hope Gunn and Aldair Sanchez, we may not be as exposed on the flanks as other teams have been punished for that in the past. If Jack Gurr overcommits, Jack Gurr can be countered very heavily, and probably to a certain degree so can Spalding, because he likes to overcommit as well. So we can catch teams in transition on whether we win balls in the middle third or their third. But if we move it defensively with a possession-based intent, we can probably really easily stifle Sacramento here. The problem is their press and their winning balls in the final third and their touches in the opposition box is better than ours right now. So their high press, their system of attack works better than ours. If we try to play possession out the back and we can't actually move it out the back and go back to route one, the game plan doesn't work. defensively, Sacramento is going to be able to respond to that. They're going to be able to reshape, and they're not going to be as unshoveled. We can't have that happen with this. We have to be able to draw them in. This game may, and both teams are pretty good about possession. Rhode Island FC is like the second or third best possession team in the league right now, but Sac is right up there. This isn't going to be a game that's won in the middle third. I think you'll see some actions there, but I think this game is going to be won on the flanks, and who can draw in more of their offense into the opponent's final third and then counter. And that's not on quick transition. That's just getting more bodies in the wrong position and taking good looks heading the opposite way. It's going to be interesting, and no matter what happens, we're going to see these duels. We're going to see it. And then we talked about what defenders do we have in this game right now. Sacramento's got some big bodies. If we don't have Frank Nodarce starting, is Aime Babika, is our Grant Stoneman, are they enough to win for set pieces, for corners, for crosses, to defend crosses? Are we going to see a lack of air superiority in this match? I don't know. But between that and then playing with possession and the intent of how Kano's been shaping this 4-2-3-1 of late, this is either going to be a tactical masterclass, or you're going to see Kano having to make some radical formation and tactic changes by the half. So interesting to see. Jason, home game momentum is everything for this squad. What does Rhode Island FC need to do to get all 3 points here at Centreville Bank Stadium and get back-to-back wins at the Vault?
I think there's going to need to be a lot of patience in regards to dealing with Sacramento's offensive threat there. RIFC does like to possess the ball as well, so we'll have to have kind of patience there in regards to what they can do going forward. I'd mentioned against Birmingham, right? That transition, those counters, it's not really our style so much anymore. I don't know if that's something maybe in terms of adjustments that coach might look at, or if he's going to kind of trust the process, what he's taught his players, and kind of push it through. I'm definitely thinking more of kind of the latter there. This is going to be a tight game. Like you said, only on 3 occasions this season have they actually given up 2 goals. So this game is either going to be a draw or it's going to be like a 1-0 victory.
Yeah, and I've got, we talked about, has Rhode Island FC shown us complete 90s? I would kind of argue, has Sacramento at the same time. They've had some chances, in clutch moments, closer to the death themselves, but they've also given up the most late-minute goals in the championship so far this season. They're at 6 goals in the final minutes of regular play. And then weirdly enough, this is such a weird stat, Sacramento also is punished by having given up the most goals by opposition substitutes so far this season. So to me, that's like saying, okay, is this
Isaac and King's music or something?
Is this team responding tactically to, is this a Coach Collins problem, right? Where he's not responding to the tactical changes of his opposition, or is this down to an individual player performance where Collins isn't making the right subs, or he is, but they're not putting in the work. They're falling apart. They're playing too long, too hard, so they can't play the complete 90s, and it's just a lack of individual performance to get it across the finish line. Don't know. I'm not watching enough tape on Sacramento, but there is some sort of problem going on in being able to close out games all the way through the 90. After what we saw against North Carolina, if Rhode Island FC can continue that kind of effort and play, their hearts out, play their guts out, this could be something where we see Rhode Island FC start to be a little more lively in the second half of these games. And if Collins doesn't react to what Kano's now demonstrated, he can tactically change and make the adjustments. This could be Rhode Island FC's game to have. I do think that defensively, these two teams are going to make this game kind of a snooze fest and only capitalize on their mistakes and punish the other group. So I don't see this as a high scoring affair. But nevertheless, I'm now back on the camp of, now that because I've said it for a long time, until Rhode Island FC shows me that they can win at home, I don't believe they can. They've now shown me against a tough opponent, a more complete opponent. I think North Carolina was a more complete team than Sacramento is right now. Sacramento's coming off of a midweek game. I don't know if that makes them more dangerous or less, but I think Rhode Island FC can probably pull this win out if they continue to learn on the tactics and the lessons that they learned from last week's game. So I've got them for a win. And the scoring prediction, I think this is the worst I've seen all season. Only 5% of fans on FOTMob and SofaScore believe that Sacramento is going to get the W in this match. I don't think I've seen it. Those are Hartford numbers on a derby, on a derby game.
I mean, I feel like even Hartford fans would show up more. Maybe Sacramento Republic fans are just into SofaScore or LiveScore or something.
I have both of those pulled. It's not just Pop Mob. So like I have all of the aggregate. Like it.
Okay, interesting.
It's bad. It's bad. We have a Sacramento fan and someone who covers the league, and William Lamb, on the show right now. He's in the chat, and it's not looking pretty in Sacramento right now. So anyways, let's talk through the weather real quick and kind of get people out the door for this show. Want to remind everyone that the weather is going to be finally the warmest game so far of the season. It's going to be probably in the low 80s and partially cloudy, which also means partially sunny. So put some sunscreen on, stay hydrated, and enjoy some decent weather finally at Centreville Bank Stadium for a game. Should be enjoyable. And remember, the parking lots do open at 4 p.m. The gates, we did get this confirmed. They officially now only open 1 hour before kickoff. So last week, there were a lot of fans lined up to get into the stadium, probably because it was 401 night. Everyone wants to crash that pretzel stand as fast as possible. But that was a lesson learned, so we've confirmed that. So you can't get into the stadium any earlier than 6 p.m., so don't try, especially if you're like, waiting, like go do something productive with your time. And then if for some reason you're not coming to the game to catch all the action, you can watch it on ESPN Plus or 790 The Score. And I just want to remind people, this is the first game of the Summer of Soccer fireworks shows. So don't leave in the 75th minute. Don't leave in the 90th minute to get home and beat traffic. Stay for after the game. The fireworks usually kick on about 5-6 minutes. They're very quick about, understanding that people want to go home. So the fireworks should come on pretty promptly after, I would say no more than 10 minutes after the match. And then enjoy a fireworks show. It should be really fun. Exciting to see fireworks return in a professional capacity here in Pawtucket. Jason, this game's going to be a lot of different things. We'll see what happens. I can't wait to see what Rhode Island FC can do here. What's the final word?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to some nicer weather. Hopefully it's not rainy. I mean, at that point, that's all I can ask for, right? And so make sure to check out our friends over at the Blazing Musket for all of your New England soccer coverage, and that's including RIFC at theblazingmusket.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at RIFC Podcast. We have an Instagram at Raising Anchor, and there's always that website you can check out, raisinganchorpodcast.com. Anchor's up, y'all. See you on Saturday.
Anchor's up, and shout out to Ben at Honeybird for the drinks and all the amazing hospitality. Catch you guys next week.